put it in and riff. In that sense, he's riffing off his own black books. I mean, he's utilizing it to. Black books aren't the law. It's the primary, but it's not the full detailed thing.
Okay, so there's this oh shoot, I do not have this. I don't have the I don't have the chat up. I have it now. All right. Wish everyone a good morning.
Morning.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the top of page 540, and let me get reoriented here. All right, so what then will remain of me, I cried. Okay, so good morning, Art. Nice to see you today. Good morning, Awakening. Good morning, Kathy. We're just getting organized this morning. We are going to start. We are using the Red Book by C.G. Jung, the Reader's Edition, and we're on page 540 in Scrutinies. And so Jung is having a conversation with Philemon, and he doesn't quite trust him at this point. And so at the top of page 540, I'm going to read, and we'll come back. But as I spoke, the old man turned into Philemon, and I saw that he was the magician who was tempting me. But Philemon continued. Excuse me just a minute. Good morning, Jamie, and good luck to Purdue today. I saw that Purdue was in the finals of the NCAA, which we'll be watching the women's finals today. Okay. So I'll read that again. Sorry for the interruption, folks.
Oh, no.
Once a year, basketball gets my attention. Anyway.
Me and the Stanley Cup. It's like all season long, and then told, oh, look, it's the end. Let's watch.
Right. And actually, I have to deal with it every day because it's what my students expect. Basketball at the end of every class, they want to go out and shoot hoops for 10 minutes. And some people have told me that's all they've got. So anyway, moving on. But as I spoke, the old man turned into Philemon, and I saw that he was the magician who was tempting me. But Philemon continued, you have not yet experienced the dismembering. You should be blown apart and shredded and scattered to the winds. Men are preparing for the Last Supper with you. What then will remain of me? I cried. Nothing but your shadow. You will be a river that pours forth over the lands. It seeks every valley and streams toward the depths. I asked, full of grief, but where will my uniqueness remain? You will steal it from yourself, Philemon replied. You will hold the invisible realm in trembling hands. It lowers its roots into the gray darkness and mysteries of the earth and sends up branches covered in leaves into the golden air. Animals live in its branches. Men camp in its shade. Their murmuring arises from below. 1,000-mile-long disappointment is the juice of the tree. It will stay green for a long time. Silence abides in its treetop. Silence in its deep roots. Okay, I just want to stop there for a minute. Do you have a comment on this, Jordan?
The silence in the treetops and the silence of the deep roots, It's starting to remind me of the old adage of when you feel lost, go to the forest and stand by a tree and look at the tree not moving. And the tree says, I'm not lost.
Right. Well, so I think what this passage is telling us is that Jung is having a vision of his fate for the next 45 or 50 years of writing. He's realizing that when you're dead, you don't know you're dead. It's only difficult for your family. But and when you're stupid, it works the same way. Um, and and so he's realizing what he has to do in his lifetime calling. And Philemon is speaking metaphorically to him, telling him that you're going to get scattered to the winds, man, but get cracking because it's time to start.
Right.
And so anyway, then we were talking about the next two paragraphs, and there's a footnote here that says that the next two paragraphs do not occur in Black Book 6. So we're thinking about what that might have meant. And Jordan, do you want to comment on what you think it meant?
On those, the branches, animals live in its branches, all that.
Well, no, yeah, you could comment on that, but also what it means that the next two paragraphs do not occur in Black Book 6.
Oh, the black books are foundational and the black books are primary, but that these would be two paragraphs that Jung is not just dictating and being his own scribe. This is the creative process still alive.
Right. And so I think that Jordan has the essence of it, that somewhere Sonu Shamdasani, who was the editor of the Red Book, found these two paragraphs and realized that they fit at this point. And so this is how they read. I'll just read the two paragraphs. And the point being that these two paragraphs didn't come up in Jung as he was doing Black Book 6. He wasn't scribing them. He came back to this period in his Black Books and realized he had to put these two paragraphs in somehow.
Yeah, so Jung put them in.
Jung put them in.
Yeah.
Or Jung added them at some later point, and Shamdasani found them and realized that this is where they belong in the dialogue. Okay, so
they're not in the Red Book, but
no, they are in the Red Book. They are in the Red Book because Shamdasani put them in the Red Book. I'm not sure that they're in Jung's Red Book, right?
Okay, so basically Shamdasani noticed.
But no, I think maybe what he's saying here is that these two paragraphs don't appear in the clinical notes, Black Book 6, but they do appear in the Red Book somehow. Either, Jung wrote out these two paragraphs and just stuck them in his Red Book, or however he put them. They're there in the Red Book.
Yeah, so Shamdasani noticed the delta of this was not in Black Books, but it does appear in the Red Books. So it's actually a pretty crucial addition that Jung
put him in. I'll have to go back and look at my big folio edition, which is written in German, and just see if I can find them in the German edition. They may be there.
And he might have just stuffed them in, like.
Yeah, he might, as he did often, because the Red Book was like a scrapbook for Jung. And so he was just keeping track of what his thoughts were and so on. And so anyway, so I'll read these two paragraphs now. I gathered from Philemon's words that I must remain true to love, to cancel out the commingling that arises through unlived love. I understood that the commingling is a bondage that takes the place of voluntary devotion. Scattering or dismembering arises, as Philemon had taught me, from voluntary devotion. It cancels out the commingling. Through voluntary devotion, I removed binding ties. Therefore, I had to remain true to love and devoted to it voluntarily. I suffer the dismembering and thus attain bonding with the Great Mother, that is, the stellar nature. Liberation from bondage to men and things. If I am bound to men and things, I can neither go on with my life as its destination, nor can I arrive at my very own and deeper nature. Nor can death begin in me as a new life, since I can only fear death. I must therefore remain true to love, since how else can I arrive at the scattering and dissolution of bondage? How else could I experience death other than through remaining true to love and willingly accepting the pain and all the suffering? As long as I do not voluntarily devote myself to the dismembering, a part of myself secretly remains with men and things and binds me to them, and thus I must, whether I want to or not, be a part of them, mixed in with them, and bound to them. Only fidelity to love and voluntary devotion to love enable this binding and mixing to be dissolved and lead back to me that part of myself that secretly lay within me, men and things. Only thus does the light of the star grow. Only thus do I arrive at my stellar nature, at my truest and innermost self that simply and singly is. It is difficult to remain true to love, since love stands above all sins. He who wants to remain true to love must also overcome sin. Nothing occurs more readily than failing to recognize that one is committing a sin. Overcoming sin for the sake of remaining true to love is difficult, so difficult that my feet hesitated to advance. Okay, that's it. Comments?
I'm always curious about the sin piece, this whole anxious worry about doing something wrong and who establishes what's wrong. I mean, I say that because people say, harmful behavior and violence, and I don't need those guardrails. I mean, it's not even right and wrong and sense and nonsense. There's well, I have no compulsion to do those things. And it's not because I was taught not to do them. They they just feel poisonous. Like, don't grab the rattlesnake. Okay, that's smart. And so this whole overcoming of sin, I find it to be inherently apologetic for, oh, I suck. Look at the original sin. I'm no good. I must be falsely humble. And even that, I don't have hubris. I'm not all full of myself that way. And so I don't know. The sin concept always strikes me as um, gratuitous, frankly.
Right. Um, and one of the issues here, of course, is that um, he lived in this menage a trois with Tony Wolfe and Emma Jung for 40 years. And we have to look at it first as from Jung's point of view, and then from the women's point of view. Um, so and leaving aside whether there was any sexuality, we don't know. Okay, we weren't there.
Yeah, they
And
make their
and so, lots of men in men's ways will argue that there was sexuality, and there may well have been, certainly at the beginning of it. And because Tony Wolfe appears from 1911 in the famous photograph um, from the conference with Freud. and with many of the other famous psychologists of the age of the 20th century, in fact. So Tony Wolff is there and Emma's there in that photograph. And some women, like Marie-Louise von France, airbrushed her out. Okay. In other words, if you look at the hardbound version of um, of Man and His Symbols, which Marie-Louise von France wasn't left to edit after Jung's death, or just before Jung's death, maybe. The photograph appears in the book, but there is no caption that mentions Tony Wolff or several of the other women. Emma Jung is mentioned, and I think 4 women are mentioned, but I think 10 women appear, including Maria Maltzer, who was the nun from Netherlands, and Tony Wolff is there, and Lou Salome is there, and so it was quite a gaggle. But Marie-Louise von France did not put captions in for those women specifically. Okay, Tony Wolff and Lou Salome are precisely not mentioned in the captioning at the end of Jung's life. And so I take that as Marie-Louise von France and her infinite wisdom doing a gotcha on Jung, getting back at him for this menage a trois. But Jung's point here is that for him, he had to overcome everybody's attitude about it. And so he simply made Tony Wolff a part of his life. His red Mercedes was seen in her driveway every Wednesday afternoon. It was there. And Tony Wolff came to dinner at the house with Emma and the family every Sunday. And from Jung's perspective, he was living what's in these 2 paragraphs. Okay, he was living what was in these 2 paragraphs. In other words, I'm not going to be ruled by the rules of society and what sin is and all of that stuff. That's what he's saying here. I'm not going to be ruled by that. And that's how he lived his life.
And I think that was the point I was making with the sin. I think I like the way you put it there, because he was based, he is himself, and he doesn't give a rat's about what anyone else thinks about him. And not mean, he's simply himself. And in that sense, the menage a trois is, for other people from a moral standpoint, forbidden fruit. And he's like, no, we make our own rules. Tony, Emma, and I make our own rules, and these are our rules, and they're none of your business. And
these were his rules.
Well, no, right. So I'm saying these are our rules. Him and Emma and Tony. I assume there's something.
That's not quite true. Okay, that's not quite true. I want to go into that.
Tell me about the confidence and the consensual between the 3 of them.
This is the way he saw it from a man's point of view, from his life's point of view. But Emma later said, not after his death, but later in life, she was asked about Tony Wolff being part of the family, basically. And she said, I'm very grateful to Tony Wolff for getting him through the Red Book period, getting him through the visioning period. Okay, so by thin praise, scant praise, right, she acknowledges that Tony Wolff did something in her life that saved Jung as her husband. Okay. And because if Jung had gone off the deep end during this, especially the 10-week period that begins Christmas Day of 1913, if Jung had gone off the deep end, she would have lost her husband, and there would have been no family life. There would have been nothing. And so she recognizes the role of Tony as his analyst, and the fact that she was able to put together for him what was going on in his psyche. She acknowledges that, but she does it with faint praise. Okay, she does it. She isn't saying that, oh yeah, I was glad to have this second woman around in my life for the next 40 years. Oh yeah, that was great, you know. And
Okay, no, I see that, because I think I'll reframe what I was saying. Then I think that Tony had the ability to receive and deftly handle and live the intensities, the Uranian tectonic Pluto, undercurrents that were going on, whereas Emma was a little more simple and not able to deal with that kind of four-wheel drive life, where he's going through stuff and he's churning it, but he needed someone who could receive it at the same level instead of
right,
pussyfoot around, basically.
right. And Emma went right along, but she went right along in trace behind him. Okay.
I can buy that. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Whereas, and so Emma was a Jungian analyst later on in life and served lots of women and so on. And so did Tony. Both of them were seeing patients. But Emma was also leading the family life and dealing with the children and everything else. Whereas, and she could not keep up with Jung's psyche.
Yeah.
And Tony Wolfe could interpret it and so on. So from a psychological point of view, they would show up at the psychology club every Wednesday night or whatever night of the week they were meeting, and they would be the three of them together, and they had chairs in the front, and that's where they sat, and nobody talked about it. I'm sure there was a lot of clucking going on, or a lot
Yeah.
of prurient interest going on, and ideas of sin going on. But that isn't how Jung was thinking about it. That's not how he was thinking about it.
Well, yeah, and that's where I call him based, where he doesn't give a rat's about what everyone else thinks. And honestly,
Right.
that kind of gossip and prurient, judgmental, it has no discernment. And the reality is, it's jealousy. It's infantile, juvenile jealousy in a way where
Right.
you're doing something I didn't even think about being able to do. And I think your comment about Emma wasn't able to handle that kind of intensity, where Tony Wolfe not only could handle it, she could notice the subtlety in these volcanic movements. So she
Yeah.
wasn't starstruck or overwhelmed. She stayed in whelm and could actually deal with the details, which is
Right.
important when someone's going through something big. The ability to listen deeper when they get louder, more intense, instead of getting blown around, is pretty important.
Right. And so Jung's life was um, cataclysmic, I would say. It was a gargantuan life. And he, after this, wrote um, books that really are a tectonic shift in Western civilization. Okay. They augur tectonic shift in Western civilization. We're still seeing that tectonic shift play out. And there are still people on the fundamentalist side who think that the Holy Father is going to come down and touch them and take them into some place they call heaven, physical place.
Mhm.
But you know, others are understanding where heaven is, what God is, what Jung meant by God, what Jung meant by the actions of God, and so on. But at this point, Jung is only seeing, at the point that we just read this paragraph, which is still in 1916, February 28th, 1916, he is he's only seeing it as a vision, what he's going to have to do. He understands what he's going to have to do, and he knows that the job is a monumental one, and he knows that, he's sort of regretting that, oh my God, I'm going to have to do this. Right? He realizes what he's going to have to do, and in order to become the Jung that we know today.
Well, I think in
So all
that
these
regard,
forces are working. What? Go
I
ahead.
think in that regard too, in a sense, I think it was Epictetus. If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless and stupid. And I think that if you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless and stupid. And I think what's interesting about that is not allowing oneself, even when clueless and stupid, to then have that demean your own sense of confidence,
Right.
where no, I'm just going through this and I don't need to judge myself that I'm less than because I have no expertise in what's happening, but he's living it into being.
Right. Okay, so I want to comment on a couple of the YouTube comments. Richard says, did Jung ever have any pleasant times with his mental illness? Pain and suffering is the permanent mood, it seems. Um, and it's like a dark romantic novel. His prose is excellent, but I've not heard any humor or happiness. Um, in some ways, Richard, that's a valid comment. Um, I I know that he had happiness, okay, because because I've read so many things of Jung and about Jung. I know that he had happiness in his own way. I wouldn't call it going to the amusement park happiness, although there were moments like that too. I mean, obviously, he had this little sailboat that Emma gave him, and he used to take it out on the lake in front of his home in Kusnak. Um, and, he spent a lot of time alone out there, and he took friends. He took Freud out there, and so, among many others. And so, those are moments of happiness. And he was a deeply introverted man. Um, and so he didn't get happiness from going to parties or anything like that. Um, and, um, his humor is there. I, you just have to have a taste for it. Now, me, I'm very introverted too, and I also have had many experiences sailing by myself, especially when I was 14 and 15 years old. And when I was 13, 14, and 15 years old, I spent summers with my grandparents, and I had my own little sailfish. It wasn't anything special, but I definitely was out on the lake by myself for hours on end.
Mhm.
And I was certainly enjoying it. and loving every minute of it. And it was kind of an extended summer meditation for me. And so I can imagine that Jung had happiness during those times. I certainly do. And there are references to the sailboat throughout his work, and also in the movie A Dangerous Method. It's the sailboat is mentioned there. So Jamie sort of giggles over the red Mercedes. I'm sure the red Mercedes gave him some moments of mirth, because
Yeah.
when he was parking it in Tony Wolf's driveway every week. I mean, it's sort of like sticking it in the eye of society.
Yeah. It's
I'm not
not hidden.
slinking around about my menage a trois. I'm sticking it in your eye, tough. I'm
Yeah.
sure
And I
that
think
was fun in a way.
that's a good observation about the omission of joy and happiness. Because I think he kept it private. It was his.
Yeah.
It was sailing on the lake. It was sitting at the edge of the lake in contemplation, or even thinking nothing, or hammering on the stone cube. I mean, so that I think it's interesting. That's a really good comment about that is omitted from his work, because the work would be, in need of being intellectual, in need of being, viscerally intelligent. And that was the kind of academic ivory tower nature of, well, how to publish. You had to seem regal and all of that. Whereas I think the softer part, which is probably more intense, was indelible, sitting by the edge of the lake or hammering on the stone with his steampunk goggles and his cigar, and or his pipe. That's a really good comment.
Okay, so there's some other comments here. State of Awakening says Emma did not want this, or it was Jung's rule. Emma did not want this, but accepted it as a show of her love for her husband. There was much animosity in the house during that time. And Kathy says, I bet the tension was epic. Richard, okay, so those comments are quite valid, I think. Um, you know, this is, and I've experienced this in some ways too. In my first marriage, um, my wife and I simply could not agree about some things. And one of those fundamental things was that my life had a trajectory that was going to be international no matter what I did. And indeed, after my divorce, I flew around the world 75 times in my business career. And I had a 40-year business career and basically traveled the world. I mean, I didn't go everywhere, but I went lots of places. And and at the time that my marriage broke up, and we were married for 17 years, um, I was feeling huge tension, because I knew that was the way my life was going to be. And my ex-wife was insistent that she wanted to strap me down into being a country lawyer in upstate New York. And that was never going to be me. Okay, that was never going to be me. And so that fundamental argument, my wife went along with it when we went to Japan. We spent 5 years in Japan. She delivered our third daughter in Japan. Um, and um, and when we first went to Japan, my wife was 7 months pregnant. She barely could get on the plane, was barely permitted to get on the plane with her pregnancy. But nonetheless, I had prepared the ground in Japan, and so she went, and she tolerated it. I would say she tolerated it. She didn't love it. I had been there 16 years earlier, 18 to 16 years earlier in high school, and my mother loved it. My mother ate Japan whole. It was a fundamental part of the rest of her life. But my ex-wife just barely tolerated it. It was the subject of many arguments. And, finally, we got to the point where one of my daughters sends this note down the spiral staircase saying, please stop fighting. And when I had read that note, I realized in that moment that we couldn't, that it was never going to be resolved. And we had to go our separate ways. And from that moment, I never looked back, honestly. I mean, I regret that I was not in the family during my daughter's growing up years, but I have made a practice of staying close to my daughters and their children. And, today I feel that I'm as close to them as I would have been if I had stayed with them. And, even my current wife and my ex-wife get along, and we have had dinner together several times, the two couples, because my ex-wife remarried it. And so, we don't have animosity between us, but, I simply knew that it couldn't go on that way. Now, Jung and Emma may have had some serious arguments between themselves over this. And, and so in the end, Emma accepted it. She didn't love it, but she accepted it. So the tension was epic, but over the years, and because there was so much going on in Europe at that time, and because there was, World War I, and Jung was going through his mental crisis, and then the in-between years between World War I and World War II, where Jung already knew by 1919, the year after the war ended, that there would be another war. He knew it was coming. He saw it coming in his clinic. And, I think most people thought it was the war to end all wars, World War I. And they thought everything would be hunky-dory, but it wasn't. And, it's the same as people thought, Roe v. Wade was done and one and done. And people thought, when we made peace among ourselves in the country after the Vietnam War, many thought that it was one and done. And yet look at the history that followed the Vietnam War. We've had numerous other wars and battles that we fought, and and the same divisions are there. They're changing subtly in the American population, and that's why I wear purple shirts, because I find myself on both sides of the political equation, but there are 8.5 billion of us in the world, and there are new ones coming along every day by the hundreds of thousands, and so the churn only allows us to make progress as a species very slowly. And so to the extent that Jung could see all that and start to write about it and pull it together in a way that the rest of us could understand, although with great difficulty, thanks very much to Edward Edinger and many other writers, Jean Shinoda-Bolen, and many others who were involved with Jung's work during his lifetime and after, we can now have an overall picture of where he was going. But at this point, February 28th, 1916, he had no clue. I mean, he was seeing it, and he was sort of staking out his position. And I think it's fascinating that we can look at his life in this overview and understand the pressures and the pulls and tugs that were involved in his life. Incredible.
Well, I think so. And even before he was quote unquote staking his position, just the dissension and the actually absolute dignity and difference between him and Freud, where he's not backing down. He's evolving. He's pulling away at a fork in the road, and it's not trying to patch it to stay together. It's Freud is a force, Jung is a force, and he recognized, he may not have recognized that he's a force, because I don't think he was that conceited. But the thing is, no, my power is important to me, at least. And that he took that power of love of his own way forward, away from Freud, to then, in a sense, individuate professionally instead of just personally.
Right. And there's a very interesting new movie out. I think it was nominated for Academy Awards, with Sir Anthony Hopkins playing Freud. It's called Freud's Last Analysis. And if you have not seen this movie, I urge you to take a look at it, because the essence of the movie is an analysis between Sigmund Freud and C.S. Lewis. And it posits the idea, although at the end they admit they don't know if this meeting ever actually occurred. They know that near the end of his life, some Oxford Don professor came and visited with Freud. They don't know who it was. Okay, but this movie posits that this person was C.S. Lewis. And C.S. Lewis has written many, as Hopkins says in the movie, C.S. Lewis is a Christian apologist. And please go out and figure out what that is if you think you need to know. Okay, but but the essence of what's happening in the movie is that C.S. Lewis has immediately after the conversation an extremely numinous experience. Okay, whereas Freud, through Anthony Hopkins, is showing his disdain for all religion, and he's a rationalist par excellence, and he has his positions. And so in terms of the acting, it is a tour de force for Anthony Hopkins, who of course has had many tour de forces in his career.
Yeah.
But Anthony Hopkins playing Sigmund Freud is very powerful, and the essence of what happens there is really interesting, and presents some interesting facts about Freud's life, because the conversation occurs about September 2nd or 3rd, 1939. And Freud died September 23rd, 1939. And so this is right at the end of Freud's life. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but the conversation is epic, and it's very good. I'd love to see treatments that are more like this for Jung, because you know, people largely don't understand Jung, obviously.
I think it's interesting with Freud. I'm really looking forward to that movie. And I think it's interesting, though, Freud's disdain of all religions. But if you weren't Jewish, you know, he had quite a hypocrisy. I mean, so
Right. So there's some things that are in the movie about being Jewish that, I want to ask my Jewish friends about, because the things I never understood. Okay, let me go back to the YouTube commentary here now. So Richard says, is Jungian psychology in any use today? And the answer, of course, is yes. You're participating in it right now. and and uh, there are, of course, thousands of Jungian analysts around the world in every country, pretty much. And so a lot of people are helped by it. And Richard says, I have a melancholic personality myself, and I'm content in it. I get it. And so, yeah, I mean, as long as we're
Mhm.
are content in our own skin, I think that counts, right? Jordan has to be content in his skin. I have to be content in my skin. Um, I know that I'm getting older, and I'm not going to always be here. I'm trying to leave legacies for my grandchildren at this point. That's what my painting is about these days, and will be for probably the next year. Um, because I have nothing from my grandparents. Okay, almost nothing. I have my one grandfather's gold watch, and I have cufflinks from the other grandfather. I have nothing from my two grandmothers. Um, and I mean, except to the extent that they passed along my grandfather's stuff. But I did have at one point my maternal grandmother's engagement ring, which was a beautiful diamond, and I gave it to my third daughter, and and, um, and my grandfather had made it into a man's pinky ring, had the diamond made into a man's pinky ring. So it's actually my son-in-law who has it today. But having a 2-carat diamond on your pinky isn't really a thing for modern men. Right?
well, there's that.
Uh,
Honestly, if you look at shamanic ring psychology, the big pinky ring means dubious sexual identity.
right.
I mean,
So,
or certain sexual identity. Um,
okay. And State of Awakening says, Skip, do you mind to provide the paragraphs that this conversation is referring to? I, I because this isn't in the typical paragraph form with numbers as the collected works are, I cannot give you a specific paragraph number. In the reader's edition today, I started at the top of page 540. And we are currently at the middle of 541. We haven't yet read where we really have to go today, but it's a paragraph that says when night fell, and I'll get to that in a moment.
and
I
also,
want to,
if you're in the PDF, rather than that's the paperback, and if you're in the PDF, it's on page 356.
okay, yeah, great. All right, so a few other comments here. Richard says a little immature with the Mercedes in the driveway, I must say. Yeah, sure. I mean, I had a red Corvette at one time. I thought it would make me happy. It didn't. Right?
Actually, if they could respond, clarify the why immature. I mean, I don't want to play the, oh, the sports car means you have a small. I mean, clarify the immature piece, because it's just a choice of a red
Well, I
Mercedes.
accept that. I will accept on Jung's behalf, because of my red Corvette, that sometimes you get I can only say a wild hair up your ass. You want to do something like that, and You know, I bought a red Corvette and then I kept it in my garage for a year and a half because I didn't want any of my employees to know I had it.
Right.
And finally I pulled it out and started using it, but I finally sold it, and it was not it it didn't make me happy the way I thought it would make me happy.
Well, it's
And
interesting, but yeah, I mean, when I was 32, I had an Audi TTS convertible, silver, baseball leather interior, and honestly, fill up that tank on Saturday, I was joyful. I mean, you hit the gas and you're in the next state, and 6-speed transmission. And the only reason actually I got rid of it is, oh, I have my own company, and $560 a month for insurance because I'm a single male.
mhm,
I was like, I could get two cars for that. So,
yeah,
um, but it was, that there was a piece of people would say, "Oh, well, you need that for." I'm like, no, I don't. It's just fun.
right. And so State of Awakening says, I grew up in a household where my mother was best friends with her ex-husband's wife. In fact, they lived next door to us and came to play cards with my parents on a near daily basis. Kathy says, when I was a kid, I witnessed open relationships amongst the adults. Yikes, it was not peaceful, free love. I think a menage a trois, more of a consenting three-way loving polygamous relationship. Yeah, I guess. And Sherry liked the film with Hopkins, uh, and said uh, Anthony Hopkins is right there with Derek Jacobi and other great English actors. Uh, Stayed Awake is thanks for recommendations, Skip. It's available to stream at home. I'll be watching this after I finish my finals paper. Yeah, it's an interesting movie and it is available at home now. I think you have to pay for it, but because
Mhm.
it's in this year's Academy Awards. But and Kathy says grandparental creative gifts will be treasures for lifetimes. Thank you. I think so, and that's why I'm doing one for each of my grandchildren individually. Um, and Cherie says, Remains of the Day with Anthony Hopkins played the butler at Darlington Castle when Hitler's invasion. Um, Mer Merchant and Ivory film, great cast, okay? And Little Red Corvette sounds to me like it. Uh, can't see that word. Just a little hidden by a heart, like it made you self-conscious. Well, it didn't make me self-conscious because, to be honest, I haven't thought of the red Corvette until just now.
Well, and it's
And
funny when people used to say, "Oh, it makes you self-conscious," and I said, "No, no, no. There's a jalopy principle. You have to look at it. I don't. I just drive it." So,
yeah, you know, when you're driving a red Corvette, it's just like driving any other car almost. Yeah, it has a little more power and you can go from 60 to 100 fairly quickly. But, you know, I never drive at that speed. I normally drive around 65, 70 if I'm on a highway. And
and I'll plead the fifth.
right. And so so having a red car just isn't anything. I mean, it's just having another car that has to be maintained. So,
Yeah, it's just more insurance. White cars are the cheapest insurance. Black can be whatever. Red are, oh, I'm going to pay more. But I think when you get a car like that, the money pieces aren't part of it. It's honestly the I have to say, going uphill in the mountains at 70, dropping from sixth gear to third gear, and running the tack up and just sidestepping the clutch, and when you're going 120 almost immediately, is there's just nothing that does that other than that. It's so good. Oh, your video froze.
Into me in a parking lot. Now, eh, I was going maybe 1 mile an hour, and that person was going less than that because they were backing up. And so here's my lovely red Prius, hybrid Prius, and this is $4,600 of damage, and it's going to take till May 1st to repair it. I can't even get it into the repair shop until April 15th, and then they need it for 2 weeks just to repair this damage. And you're probably saying, where's the damage?
Right.
But
The scratches at the door handle and then the
yeah,
dent.
this guy got this little corner of the front door, which was
Oh,
enough to screw up the front door, the whole back door, the whole quarter panel, over the tire. Both of these panels have to be replaced completely, and so it's $4,600 of damage. And um,
I have to say,
I
at least you didn't mess up that little window, because I remember that tiny little that one right behind your back window, the weird small shape. Um, I had a
yeah,
truck that picked up two rocks and knocked out those back two windows, and um, the back window was $200, and the little one was $1,700 because it's such a specialized piece. I mean, it's
yeah,
like, wow, I'll just go cut some glass
yeah.
myself at my friend's studio.
Well, and I like driving that car, but normally when I go to school, I drive a 21-year-old Honda Civic, and it's beige, and
And
uh, and so I don't even that the red car is driven by Debbie most of the time, and but it just happened that the day I was driving it is the day I got backed into. Fortunately, I was found not responsible in any way, so I don't even have to pay the deductible
deductible.
on. And USAA, I just love USAA. If you can ever get USAA as your car insurance, definitely do it. If you have a father or grandfather who was in the US military, you're eligible, or grandmother for that matter, um, because and it used to be only for officers, but now everybody in the military has access to USAA. And they are such a good car insurance company. They have actually already paid the body shop. They already paid the $4,600 to the people that are going to repair my car, and I haven't even given them the car yet, other
Yeah.
than and they're going to give us a car for 2 weeks. So uh, a rental car for 2 weeks. So
That right there is the big piece, because I mean,
yeah,
play the rental car daily insurance, I mean, per diem insurance and all that, it starts to just run up.
right. So anyway, that's the joys of having a red car. And even, this is a red car, and the guy still did not see it in his rearview mirror, for crying out loud. Okay, anyway,
Well,
I
and that
do.
actually, that whole people's blind driving, I mean, um, you start to notice when people get into cars how insulated and unobservant they are. And I mean, just wandering all over the road as if they're the only person out there. And I don't know, when I'm driving, it's not a defensive driving. I might as well be on a racetrack going slow. I need to know where everything, I mean, people are like, why don't you look at me when you're driving? It's like, I don't make eye contact with people in the car. I'm driving, I mean, it's drive, and actually drive like you mean it. So it sounds like he's just kind of oblivious.
And Kathy makes this comment here, the little red Corvette sounds like it made you self-conscious. And I acknowledge that. I do acknowledge that. Okay, so now we're going to read the part we were supposed to read for today, which is beginning on the last full paragraph on page 541 of, we are still reading The Red Book by C.G. Jung, a reader's edition, edited by Sonia Shamdasani. Okay, so Jung is going back into his active imagination now. When night fell, Philemon approached me in an earth-colored robe, holding a silver fish. Look, my son, I was fishing and I caught this fish. I bring it to you so that you may be comforted. And as I looked at him astonished and questioningly, I saw that a shade stood in darkness at the door, bearing a robe of grandeur. His face was pale, and blood had flowed into the furrows of his brow. But Philemon knelt down, touched the earth, and said to the shade, My master and my brother, praised be your name. You did the greatest thing for us. Out of animals you made men. You gave your life for men to enable their healing. Your spirit was with us through an endlessly long time, and men still look to you and still ask you to take pity on them and beg for the mercy of God and the forgiveness of their sins through you. You do not tire giving to men. I praise your divine patience. Are are not men un, are not men ungrateful? Does their craving know no limits? Do they still make demands on you? They have received so much, yet still they are beggars. Quote, Behold my master and my brother, they do not love me, but they long for you with greed, for they also crave their neighbor's possessions. They do not love their neighbor, but they want what is his. If they are faithful to their love, they would not be greedy, but whoever gives attracts desire. Should they not learn love, fidelity to love, freely willed devotion, but they demand and desire and beg from you and have learned no lesson from your awe-inspiring life. They have imitated it, but they have not lived their own lives as you have lived yours. Your awe-inspiring life shows how everyone would have to take their own life into their own hands, faithful to their own essence and their own love. Have you not forgiven the adulteress? Did you not sit with the whores and tax collectors? Did you not break the command of the Sabbath? You lived your own life, but men fail to do so. Instead, they pray to you and make demands on you and forever remind you that your work is incomplete. Yet your work would be completed if men managed to live their own lives without imitation. Men are still childish and forget gratitude, since they cannot say, Thanks be to you, our Lord, for the salvation you have brought us. We have taken it unto ourselves, given it a place in our hearts, and we have learned to carry on your work in ourselves on our own. Through your help, we have grown mature in continuing the work of redemption in us. Thanks to you, we have embraced your work. We grasped your redemptive teaching. We completed in ourselves what you had begun for us with bloody struggle. We are not ungrateful children who desire our parents' possessions. Thanks to you, our masters, thanks to you, our master, we will make the most of your talent and will not bury it in the earth and forever stretch out our hands helplessly and urge you to complete your work in us. We want to take your troubles and your work upon ourselves so that work may be completed and so that you may lay your weary, tired hands in your lap, like the worker after a long day's hard burden. Blessed is the dead one who rests from the completion of his work. I wanted people to address you in this way, but they have no love for you, my master and brother. They begrudge you the price of peace. They leave your work incomplete, eternally needing your pity and your care. But my master and my brother, I believe you have completed your work, since the one who has given his life, his entire truth, all his love, his entire soul, has completed his work. What one individual can do for men, you have done and accomplished and fulfilled. The time has come when each must do his own work of redemption. Mankind has grown older, and a new month has begun. When Philemon had finished, I looked up and saw that the place where the shade had stood was empty. I turned to Philemon and said, My father, you spoke of men. I am a man. Forgive me. But Philemon dissolved into darkness, and I decided to do what was required of me. I accepted all the joy and every torment of my nature and remained true to my love, to suffer what comes to everyone in their own way. And I stood alone and was afraid. I'll stop there.
Yeah, that reminds me, especially in that building up to that last point of, um, I'm not remembering the exact quote, but Jung said the greatest privilege of a lifetime is to be fully yourself. Also, the most terrifying.
Yeah.
That I think goes back to when we started, where Jung is so based. He does not give a rat's about what other people think, and he's going to continue his work. Just call him a sports car bulldozer. He's going to go driving, and we stay with these car metaphors of the Corvette, the Audi.
Yeah. Okay, so Cherie made an interesting comment here, which I have to mention. Cherie said, please watch Salt Cube Analytics with Phil Toomey. He was on the USS Liberty naval ship AGTR 5. A great discussion. Okay, well, so it's the salt cube analytics.
Salt cube analytics.
Right, with Phil Toomey. I haven't heard of that, but I will certainly look into it. The reason is that one of my high school girlfriends, and by this I mean a female friend, and I have been communicating for 20 years. We've known each other for 60, and we communicate almost daily. And her experience was that her boyfriend, when we were in high school, joined the Navy and happened to be on the Liberty when it was attacked by Israel in the Six-Day War. And this was not a good day for the U.S. Navy, I will say, because the Navy was required by higher command to hush it up and not talk about it, and to not make a stink with Israel for attacking a known U.S. Navy ship that was flying the Stars and Stripes. And it was no doubt that it was not an Arab ship, but the Israelis attacked it nonetheless, and there were a lot of sailors injured, including this man who was the boyfriend of my friend. And every time I see her, we relive that moment. So if you don't know anything about the USS Liberty, on behalf of all of my friends in the Navy, I wish you'd look it up on Google and read the stories about it and know what happened to the USS Liberty in 1967. I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so Richard says, alchemical way to heaven put you in the microscope of God, and it is terrifying, so true.
I think that's a good comment, and I'd like to actually extend that comment, because then if you turn, the problem is when you put yourself in your own microscope, then you start to worry about every little thing, and half the time it's like giving a speech where it was seamless and fluid. And at the end, people are like, well, how'd that go? Oh, I was just all over the place, blipping and messing up, and no one else noticed anything. And it's because when you're in that flow state, sometimes you notice too much. And so noticing it is fine, but then I think chastising yourself for it is not. So
Right.
not taking yourself down ever. I think there's a false sense of I am self-monitoring by, oh, I can critique myself. Sometimes that gets in the way.
Right.
Most times it gets in the way.
Right. And I think that this particular 2 pages, where Jung is through Philemon talking to the shade, and really he's talking about the flaws of Christianity, I think. And he's right. It's incontrovertible. You know, Christ did not die to give everybody a get out of jail free card. Not at all. Right. And you know, when the priest accompanies you to the electric chair and prays with you, you know, he's not getting you a get out of jail free card. Not at all. You're going to suffer the whatever penalty that society puts upon you. But you have to do your own redemption. You have to find a way to redeem yourself. And Cherie says, thank you, Skip. As you know, my brother was on that ship. He lived, but he did not keep his mouth shut. It cost him his life on July 3rd, 1983. And, you know, I think that many men who were on the Liberty, you know, died one way or another, and it wasn't pretty. And it's to me, it's a shame of both the United States Navy and of Israel at that time. And it's one of these things where, oh, we can't, there's nothing we can do to redeem that moment. Okay, there's nothing we can do to redeem that moment. It was just a horrible thing. I mean, it would be like today if the Israeli Defense Force were to attack the new causeway that the United States is building so that aid can go to Gaza. If an Israeli airplane were to attack that, you know, where's the redemption in that afterward? I mean, it's bad enough with the World Central Kitchen attack, which is like that. Okay, it's like that in many ways.
I'll be right back.
All right. So, and Richard says, I'm not sure what it is, but it brings us elemental spirits of thousands. I see hundreds of them all over Jordan's ceiling. Christ came to open the gates to heaven for humans. I love Jesus more than anything. Okay, great. You know, far be it from me to take away anyone's path to redemption. Okay, and because everybody has a different path to redemption, and it's obvious that Richard's path to redemption is through Jesus Christ, and I would not diss that in any way. And as far as seeing things, if you see any of my paintings, you'll see that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals in my paintings, but more on that at one another occasion. So reading on a night when everything was silent, I heard a murmur like that of many voices, and a bit more clearly. I'm sorry, I have children outside my window screaming. I think they've stopped. All right, I will begin again. On a night when everything was silent, I heard a murmur like that of many voices, and a bit more clearly. I heard the voice of Philemon, and it was as if he were giving a speech. And as I listened more closely, I heard these words, quote, and the footnote at the beginning of this reads, the next two passages also occur in dreams, in a book called Dreams, after entries for the middle of July 1917, introduced by this statement, fragments of the next book, unquote. So this is what he heard Philemon saying. Afterward, when I had impregnated the dead body of the underworld, and when it had given birth to the serpent of the god, I went to men and saw the fullness of their affliction and their madness. I saw that they were slaying each other and that they sought the grounds for their actions. They did this because they did not have anything different or better to do. But because they were accustomed to doing nothing for which they could not account, they devised reasons that compelled them to go on killing. Stop, you are out of your minds, and the sage. Stop, you are out of your mind, said the sage. Stop, for heaven's sake, and take stock of what damage you have done, said the canny one. But the fool laughed since horrors had been conferred upon him overnight. I'm sorry. The fool laughed since honors had been conferred upon him overnight. Why do men not see their stupidity? Stupidity is a daughter of the god. Therefore, men cannot stop murdering, since thus they serve the serpent of the god without knowing it. It is worth giving one's life for the sake of serving the serpent of the god. Hence, be reconciled. But it would be far better to live despite the god. But the serpent of the god wants human blood. That this feeds it and makes it shine. Not wanting to murder and die amounts to deceiving the god. Whoever lives has become one who deceives the god. Whoever lives invents life for himself. But the serpent wants to be deceived out of hope for blood. The greater the number of men who stole their lives from the gods, the greater the harvest feeding the serpent from the blood-sown field. The god grows strong through human murder. The serpent grows hot and fiery through the drenching blood. Its fat burns in the blazing flame. The flame becomes the light of men, the first ray of a renewed sun, he, the first appearing light. I could not grasp what else Philemon said. I spent a long time pondering his words, which evidently he had spoken to the dead, and I was horrified by the atrocities that attend the rebirth of a god. Okay, so I just want to stop there for a moment. So Jung is now in the middle of World War I. He's not directly involved because he's Swiss and living in a neutral country, but obviously everyone was cognizant of the carnage that was taking place in World War I. And so I think that, and this is long before the U.S. entered World War I, because the U.S. didn't enter World War I for another year until 1917. And so this is 1916, February. And already the war's been going on for 2 years. There's been just carnage everywhere. The trench warfare and the gas warfare was horrific, as we all know. And so Jung is basically showing his psychological reaction to what human beings were doing to one another at that time.
And in a very, wow, fundamentalist, deceived way. Just the verbiage here of that no one has their own personal sovereignty and everyone's deceived if they're alive and they're against any divinity, if they're breathing. I mean, this whole paragraph is this wow of a stomping picket of original sin, as if,
Yeah.
and this to me, what's interesting though is, of course, it feels like the fool is speaking this because the fool has had honors confirmed rather than just not having his head lopped off. So there's a whole piece here that comes to me kind of non sequitur out of nowhere, but like you said, his reaction to World War I, this is kind of what's going on. And but the thing is, God goes strong. The God grows strong through human murder. It's just like things like that where it's not okay. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to me where, me who was like, don't tell me about forbidden fruit. Here's a forbidden fruit. Don't do that. That's not going to make anything stronger. It's ruthless, cruel, and that typically means very, very weak and unbased.
Right. And probably 4 or 5 million men, for the most part, lost their lives after Jung was writing this.
Yeah.
Okay. And, so it's fascinating to me to see this juxtaposition. Okay. Jordan, I wanted to mention to you while you were out, Richard put this interesting comment on YouTube, which he says it brings out elemental spirits by the thousands. I see hundreds of them all over Jordan's ceiling. So Richard is seeing a lot behind you on your ceiling.
Thank you. It's nice to have my own audience behind me.
Right.
I'm in Taos and talking about elements. So
Amen.
actually, could you read the comment again? Because I missed the
He
first part.
says, well, I'm not sure what it referred to. He first said the alchemical way to heaven put you in the microscope of God, and it's terrifying. So true, Jordan. He says Gordon, but he means Jordan.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Gordon's on Sesame Street. I get it though.
Right. And then he says it brings the elemental spirits by the thousands. I see hundreds of them all over Jordan's ceiling. Christ came to open the gates to heaven for humans. I love Jesus more than anything else. I hope I didn't freak you out, Jordan. Wasn't my intention. If you take a few still pics with any digital camera, you may see them. Be careful by angling the pic.
Oh, so it sounds like I've got Rodin's Gates of Hell behind me, is what he's saying, that's got to
Right,
be the coolest thing. Thank you.
right.
No, if
Well,
you freak me out, you'll get a certificate. That's kind of difficult to do. I mean, honestly, when you've seen death, etc., it's like a coroner. I mean,
yeah.
try to freak out the coroner. I mean, but thank you for that comment. Now I'm looking at my ceiling. So
Okay, I just want to look up if I can show you one thing, but I don't have the latest thing, but maybe I have one. Let's see if I can get this. Ah, yes. Okay. So I'm going to just show you what I'm seeing every day, every morning when I'm painting, speaking of many spirits, this is a painting that I'm going to give to my 12-year-old grandson on May the 3rd. But as you see, I'm seeing literally hundreds of faces in this painting, and this painting is only 6 inches by 9. It's 9 inches wide and 6 inches tall. And so in that, look at all the faces that I'm seeing. And they just come out. They just emerge. And it's really amazing, the experience of having that. But that's what's
Stuff.
happening to me in my painting, my Rocky painting every day. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, please go to BookBaby and purchase Colleen Kiber's book entitled Art and Spirit. And you will see what we're talking about here. All right, so going on. And so the beginning footnote here in this next paragraph is May the 3rd, 1916. And soon afterward, I saw Elijah and Salome in a dream. Elijah appeared concerned and alarmed. Therefore, when in the following night that light was extinguished and every living sound fell still, I called Elijah and Salome so that they would answer my questions. Elijah came forward and said, I have become weak. I am poor, and excess of my power has gone to you, my son. You took too much from me. You went too far away from me. I heard strange and incomprehensible things, and the peace of my depths became disturbed. I answered, but what did you hear? What voices did you hear? Elijah answered, I heard a voice full of confusion, an alarmed voice, full of warning and the incomprehensible. What did it say? I asked. Did you hear the words? Indistinctly, it was confused and confusing. The voice spoke first of a knife cutting something, or perhaps harvesting, perhaps the grapes that go to the winepress, perhaps the one wearing the red robe treads the winepress from which the blood flows. Thereupon the voice spoke of gold that lies below, and that kills whoever touches it. Then it mentioned fire that burns terribly, and that should flare up in our time. And then there was a malicious word that I would rather not utter. And I want to make a reference here. He's in these grapes that go to the wine press. He's making a reference to the grapes of wrath, and which are appears in the very end, the final verses of what's the last
Revelation.
The Bible, Revelation. Okay, so in the last verses of Revelation, the grapes of wrath appear. And if you know anything about the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which was from Civil War times, you know that the Union troops were seeing themselves as stamping out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. And so it's a very moving passage here. It's again a very similar reference to Revelation and the very last words, the very last verses of the Bible. So I would urge you to take a look at that. All right, so a malicious word, what is it? I asked. He answered, a word about the death of God. There is only one God, and God cannot die. And then I replied, I am astonished, Elijah. Do you not know what happened? Do you not know that the world has put on a new garb, that the one God has gone away, and that in turn many gods and many demons have come to man? Truly, I am surprised. I am extremely surprised. What could you not have known? Know you nothing of the new that has come to pass? Yet you know the future. You have foresight, or maybe you should not know what is. Do you ultimately deny what is? Okay, and there's a footnote. I'll read it. In Memories, Jung stated, the figures of the unconscious are also uninformed and need man or contact with consciousness in order to attain to knowledge. When I began working with the unconscious, I found myself much involved with the figures of Salome and Elijah. Then they receded, but after about 2 years, they reappeared. To my complete astonishment, they were completely unchanged. They spoke and acted as if nothing had happened in the meantime. In actuality, the most incredible things had taken place in my life. I had, as it were, to begin from the beginning again, to tell them all about what had been going on and explain things to them. At the time, I had been greatly surprised by this situation. Only later did I understand what had happened. In the interval, the two had sunk back into the unconscious and into themselves. I might equally put into timelessness. They remained out of contact with the, they remained out of contact, or I'm sorry, yeah. They remained out of contact with the I and the I's changing circumstances, and therefore were ignorant of what had happened in the world of consciousness. This appears to refer to this conversation. Okay, all right. So I'll just read the last sentence again and then onward. Or maybe you should not know what is. Do you ultimately deny what is? Salome interrupted me. What is gives no pleasure. Pleasure comes only from the new. Your soul would also like a new husband. Ha ha. She loves change. You are not pleasurable enough for her. In that respect, she is unteachable, and therefore you believe she is mad. We love only what is coming, not what is. Only the new gives us pleasure. Elijah does not think about what is, only about what is to come. Therefore, he knows it. I answered, what does he know? He should say. Elijah said, I have already uttered the words. The image that I saw was crimson, fiery colored, a gleaming gold. The voice that I heard was like distant thunder, like that wind roaring in the forest, like an earthquake. It was not the voice of my God, but it was a thunderous pagan roar, a call my ancestors knew, but which I have never heard. It sounded prehistoric, as if from the forest of a distant coast. It rang with all the voices of the wilderness. I was full of horror, yet harmonic. It was full of horror, yet harmonic. To this I replied, my good old man, you heard correctly, as I thought you had. How wonderful. Shall I tell you about it? After all, I told you that the world has acquired a new face, a new cover has thrown over it. How odd that you don't know. Response. Old gods have become new. The one God is dead. Yes, truly, he died. He disintegrated into the many, and thus the world became rich overnight. And something also happened to the individual soul. Who would care to describe it? Who would care to describe it? But therefore men too became rich overnight. How is it possible that you didn't know this? This one God became two, a multiple one, whose body consists of many gods, and a single one, whose body is a man, and yet is brighter and stronger than the sun. What should I tell you about the soul? Haven't you noticed that she has become multiple? She has become the closest, nearest, near, far, further, furthest, and yet she is one as before. First, she divided herself into a serpent and a bird, then into a father and a mother, and then into Elijah and Salome. How are you, my good fellow? Does it disturb you? Yes, you must be realizing that you are already very far removed from me, so that I can hardly reckon you as being part of my soul. Since if you belong to my soul, you would have to know what is happening. Therefore, I must separate you and Salome from my soul and place you among the demons. You are connected to what is primordially old and always exists. Therefore, you also know nothing of the being of men, but simply of the past and the future. Nevertheless, it is good that you came to my call. Take part in that which is, for what is ought to be such that you can take part in it. But Elijah sullenly replied, I do not like this multiplicity. It is not easy to think it. And Salome said, the simple alone is pleasurable. One need not think about it. I replied, Elijah, you need not contemplate it at all. It is not to be thought, it is to be viewed. It is painting. And in Salome, I said, and to Salome, I said, Salome, it is not true that only the simple is pleasurable. Over time, it is even boring. In truth, the multiple captivates you. But Salome turned to Elijah and said, Father, it seems to me that men have outstripped us. He is right. The many is more pleasurable. The one is too simple and always the same. Elijah seemed saddened and said, what about the one in this case? Does the one still exist if it stands next to the many? I answer, that is your old and ingrained mistake, that the one excludes the many. But there are many individual things. The multiplicity of individual things is the one multiple God from whose body many gods arise. But the uniqueness of the one thing is the other God, whose body is a man, but whose spirit is as large as the world. But Elijah shook his head and said, that is new, my son. Is the new good? What was is good. What was will be. Is that not the truth? Has there ever been anything new, and was what you call new ever good? Everything remains the same if you give it a new name. There is nothing new. There can be nothing new. How could you then look ahead? I look at the past, and therein I see the future. Well, this is about prophecy. I look at the past and therein see the future as in a mirror, and I see that nothing new happens. Everything is but mere recurrence of what has been since time immemorial. What is your being? An appearance, a darting light. Tomorrow it is no longer true. It is gone. It is as if it never was. Come, Salome, let us go. One is mistaken in the world of men. But Salome looked back and whispered to me while leaving, being and multiplicity appeal to me, even if it is not new and not eternally true. Thus they disappeared into the dark night, and I returned to the burden signified by my experience, and I sought to do everything correctly that seemed to me to be a task, and to take every way that seemed to me to be necessary for myself. But my dreams became difficult and laden with anxiety, and I did not know why. One night, my soul suddenly came to me as if worried and said, "Listen, listen to me. I am in a great torment. The son of the dark womb besieges me. Therefore, your dreams are also difficult, since you feel the torment of the depths, the pain of your soul, and the suffering of the gods." I answered, "Can I help? Or is it superfluous that a man elevates himself to being a mediator of the gods? Is it presumption, or should a man become a redeemer of the gods after men are saved through the divine mediator?" "You speak the truth," my soul replied. "The gods need a human mediator and rescuer. With this, man paves the way to crossing over and to divinity. I gave you a frightening dream so that your face would turn to the gods. I let their torment reach you so that you would remember the suffering gods. You do too much for men, since they are the masters of your world. You can, in effect, help men only through the gods, not directly. Alleviate the burning torment of the gods." Much further here. This is getting long. Okay. I'm just going to do it. There's 3 more pages to the end of this section, and there's a lot in it, and we'll have to decide what to comment on next time. What do you think, Jordan? Is that okay?
Well, before I lose this, because it's too funny to me, and I think next week I will have forgotten it. When it where's the oh, it's back another page. You are not pleasurable enough for her. In that respect, she is unteachable, and therefore you believe she is mad. So this is Elijah certainly has a self-avoidance. So I don't get you, therefore you must be wrong, instead of, oh cool, I don't get you, I'm going to listen more deeply. But we love only what is coming, not what is. Only the new gives us pleasure. Elijah does not think about what is, only about what is to come. I'm going, wow, look at the adrenaline junkie who is completely afraid of commitment. This person cannot deal with what's actually in front of him. So that's why he's this is the whole, demonized Lilith. In that respect, she is unteachable, and therefore you believe she is mad. I would say, oh, any woman worth demonizing is worth getting to know a lot better, because who's trying to cover up the good stuff? But this whole Elijah insane fear of commitment was just it. I was trying to hold my laughter because it was just so beautifully obvious and funny.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's all, because
Yeah.
I know by next week that would have passed. I forgot it.
Right.
I would have
Right.
forgotten.
Right. Well, I am going to stop here because there's sort of a new topic that believes
Yeah.
that comes up where with this man paves the way to crossing over into to divinity. And believe it or
Yeah.
not, folks, we are probably going to finish this next week, the whole book. Okay.
Right.
We are currently on page 548, and in all likelihood, we will finish on page 553, which is only 5 pages more. Okay. And Richard, if you don't believe that he's funny, or whoever was saying that Jung isn't funny, I have to tell you that the end of the Red Book is hilarious, and and it's gotcha.
Well, and that's what I think is funny, because at this point, him writing Elijah with such an insane fear of commitment and an inability to sit still, basically, he's hyper. I mean,
Yeah,
Elijah's kind of got hyperactivity going on, and I think that's interesting because at this point he's starting to do that kind of tectonic undercurrent. I'm going to shake these people up a little bit and show you Elijah's fatal flaws.
right. And so I will begin next week with "You speak the truth, my soul replied. The gods need a human mediator and rescuer.
Yeah.
With this man paves the way to crossing over and to divinity." Okay, so that will be the beginning for next week. And probably, believe it or not, after whatever it's been, a couple of years now, we will have finished the Red Book.
Wow.
Breathtaking. Wow. And I'm really at a loss about where to go next.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that because the end is nigh. Um, so um, yeah, I've just been thinking about
I,
that. What to
yeah,
do. So I just want to let it run still because I
right.
don't want to
But
force it.
what I want to do, I guess, for the next after that, for at least for a bit, is read the first essay from Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions. And the first essay in this, by my friend Thomas Arst, who sadly died on Easter Sunday in 2020 from, he was one of the very first casualties from COVID, um, is a profound essay. It is a profound essay. And I really think it is worth reading and talking about. I have read it before and commented on it before. So if you're anxious to know where this is going, you can go back to the homepage of this YouTube channel and you can find Jung's Red Book for Our Time and hear my reading of Thomas's essay, which is just brilliant. It's really brilliant and really tells us why this is so important. And
That sounds good. It'll give us basically a segue of a beginning that is past.
and Cherie says collected works of Jung's writings, June 30th, 1960. Last writing of his life, he passed on June 6th, 61. Thank you all for today. The essay by Jung in Man and His Symbols is the last essay that he wrote in his life, and that is also profound. And he finished it only 10 days before he died, and so that may deserve our attention.
Yeah.
In the future. And
We've come a ways.
yeah, this has been a long journey, and as some of you may know, we are basically at the beginning of the Red Book in the advanced class, which happens every Wednesday at 5 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And we have a very loyal following in that group. And so if you want to sort of review again with some of our more advanced students, you're certainly welcome to go to our um, pick list of things that you want to follow. And I guess since I'm talking about it, I better find it so that you can see it. But the
I may
point,
show up and just listen to see where everyone else is and what perspectives they have.
yeah, I mean it's a good group, and obviously they're more advanced students somewhat than the YouTube audience that is just hearing this for the first time. Um, and but they had not read the Red Book. Okay, that group had not read the Red Book. And so I agreed to do it again for them. And I guess this has sort of become my thing and Jordan's thing. Okay, I found my MailChimp. Okay, so I'm gonna give you the link to the new MailChimp. And if you go into this link, why didn't it go? No, excuse me, sorry, wait a minute. What happened? Wait a minute. I'm going to give you the new MailChimp, I believe. There it is. Okay. All right. So if you go to that link, you can sign yourself up for the advanced class or any other of the things that we do. The main things we're doing right now, because I'm totally engaged in my special education teaching, which is totally enervating, is we are doing Sunday mornings. We are doing Wednesday at 5 U.S. Eastern Time, and we are occasionally doing Wisdom Path with Tim Holmes. And our most recent Wisdom Path was with Colleen Kibert about her new book, Art and Spirit. I urge you to get a copy of that book. You can get it. I think it might be available on Amazon now, if I'm not mistaken. But it's available on Book Baby, something called Book Baby. She self-published it, and it's where most famous or important writers have to publish these days, because we don't have that many reliable publishers anymore. And they seem to want to publish tabloid stuff. So
It's like tabloids and bestsellers, same kind of with Hollywood, where we get a lot of epics, but not a lot of bio. It's kind of and film storytelling. It's superheroes and series stuff. So I'm comic books on the movies,
yeah,
which
so
is fine. They're
they
fun.
always try to do what they have done in the past that made them money. So
Yeah, it's like the $1 billion cover charge minimum.
right. So anyway, thank you very much for being here, everyone. Thank you, Jordan, and good luck with today. How's the weather in Taos?
Today, wonderful. Yesterday, 40-mile-an-hour wind, snow, sleet, hail, rain, and
Well,
the
that's
wind.
not very good for Thoreau.
Well, no, yesterday was, I'm not even going out. I mean, I didn't even leave the house. It was, because it was just, the weather was just nuts. And then today it's not much wind, sunny. It's going to be in the 50s, and it's beautiful. Yesterday though it was squall kind of. It
Yeah.
was really, the whole roof, boom, boom, you can hear it, just pumping around. So,
Yeah.
but now it's beautiful today.